those nice words? Print tablets.
I can improvise.
Darcy can improvise.
We could go improvise if we get it.
We light this chalice to honor and remember the past. We light this chalice to experience the present. And we light this chalice for our dreams and hopes for the future.
Well said.
That says it all.
You're a natural
The
person.
chance went out. Need to excavate some wood ones there. Those beautifully said, Darcy's is message to have some seasoned Unitarian persons to
A seasoned unitarian. I like that.
sure we don't know what we're doing.
What are we seasoned with?
Wisdom.
It's only the first of many questions.
We'll feel the light in our hearts if we can't actually get it.
Darcy's ready for the show. Darcy, it's been 3 days of everything being perfect.
Pardon?
It's been 3 days.
Yes.
of everything
I
being
know,
perfect.
it's been wonderful.
Yes.
Nice.
Lighting the chalice is the first thing to know.
Yes, I heard yesterday was awesome.
Really.
Yeah, so that's great.
You wanna?
Over to you, Darcy. Thank you so much.
Thank you everybody for coming and being here. I guess I could introduce myself. My name's Darcy Hall, and I'm going to be talking about some of the statues in Orange, New Jersey. I am a retired high school English teacher, and I'm a born and raised Unitarian. I was raised at the Unitarian Church of All Souls in Manhattan, and I've been here for, I don't know, 30,000 years? I don't know, kind of a long time. Anyway, so I'm very honored to be here today talking to you about a city that many of us know and love, Orange, New Jersey. And I know some of you here know more than I do about Orange, but I have a little area of interest, a little particular area, which is statues and sculpture. So I'm going to share some stuff about that. First, I'll just tell you that I love public art. I love public art because it's free, it's open to everybody, and there's a direct, unmediated confrontation with it. It's there, and you're here, and you look at it. So at one level, that's all you need. But at another level, there's always stories, there's always history, so I want to share some of that with you. And I know that it's easy to brush by statues that are on the street or all these things that you walk by. But just stop for a minute and reflect that some people before us, they really cared about something. They really, really cared. And that putting up the statues for the public art that's 100 years old, there's no municipal art budget or something. People felt that there was something important that needed to be said in these statues. And we are very remote from that, because it's been 100 years or 120 years or whatever it's been. So I want to try to fill in some of that. Another thing that I was talking to Margot about is we spend so much time on our phones. One thing, our lives are, our lives are like this, right? Our whole body, our eyes, they're all in our phones. So it's this narrow, algorithmic world that we're operating in. But if you look at a statue, you know, it's like your body opens up. Your eyes are seeing. You can look at a statue close up, you can look at it far away, you can touch it, you can walk around it, you know. So it really, it like changes your whole body right? And so, something I'm hoping some of us will do, whether any statues in Orange or anyplace else, to get out of our phones. Another thing that I want to tell you about with the statues is nobody gets a statue made if they sat on the couch watching TV and eating potato chips. A statue or memorial is made because people have a very deep passion and motivation of an unfinished story, right? So when we walk by a statue, there's some statue, it's 100 years old, it's some guy in a dress or long whatever. When that statue was put up, there were very conflicting feelings, maybe some guilt, pain, right? Because think about it, if there's a story to be told and the story's over, that's not interesting. So you wouldn't put up a statue because nobody would think about it. So just by virtue of the fact that there's a statue, when it was being made, some large numbers of people really felt that. So moving along, so I'm going to tell you some stories about three things, about two statues and something else. But before I do that, just thinking about cities, of course we're talking about urban and cities of the conference we just had. So you guys are very sophisticated, and you know that cities are these incredibly complex places of all this different activity. Cities are contested zones of conflict. People come, people go, new people come, the new people become the old people, and the newer people come, and it's an endless churning process. Buildings go up, buildings come down, new buildings go up, down, so it ever was. Of course, the irony of this is that the statues stay there. Unless somebody is really motivated to move something that weighs many tons, the statue stays there. So whatever that trauma that got the statue put up, or the guilt, or the conflict, we may forget that, but it's sort of there. So before I jump into the statues, just a little bit about, I don't want this to be a high school history lesson, but just a little bit about the background of Orange. So it's just helpful to know a little history, because I referenced that in the statue and stuff. So the land that we're on right now was originally inhabited by the Lenni Lenape Indians. In 1666, Puritan Captain Robert Treat, he's from Connecticut, from New Haven, Connecticut, and he felt that the people of Connecticut in his area were not godly enough. So if the people aren't godly enough, where do you go? New Jersey! So he gets a land grant in New Jersey, and this is called Newark. It's not the Newark that we know. It's a huge space to the mountains to the west. And of course, the godly people of New Jersey, well, we know how that turned out. But anyway, so for our purposes, what we need to care about is that this huge piece of land gets broken up and fragmented, and in 1807, that eventually becomes Orange. That's kind of the beginning of Orange. It's more complicated, but that's good enough for now. That's these little towns. That's why our taxes are so high, right? Because all these little towns, right? Anyway, so now, fast forward several decades. I feel like things are kind of quiet, whatever. Civil War. Now it's 1861 to 1865. So American life was dominated, of course, by the Civil War. After the Civil War, as most of you probably know, the latter half of the 19th century, the United States grew in industry, population, and wealth. It became extremely wealthy. Interesting about the population of the U.S., by the way. American population in 1860, any guesses? 1860, before the Civil War, how big the country was? 31 million. By 1900, the population of the U.S. was 76 million. Yeah, and 14% of that were immigrants from other countries, not born in America. So anyway, Orange was one of the cities that benefited from this wealth generation, and Orange prospered. The signs are everywhere. Our beautiful Tiffany window, the library that we were at on Friday. That was designed by the prestigious firm of McKim, Mead and White in 1900, and there's lots of other things. There's so much wealth here. Orange, by the way, was always an important transportation center and an industrial center. Even back to the 18th century, there was 18th century style industry. So this was a busy little place. All right, so, in her book, Main Street, Mindy Fullilove talks about the concept of line, which is defined as the uninterrupted public thoroughfare passing through the heart of downtown. So I thought a useful focal point for talking about some statues was the line of Main Street. That made sense to me, right? Because when people walk, they like things to make sense, to be easy, to be logical, right? So I thought, let me take you on an imaginary walk down about a mile east of here, Main Street, right? We're going to walk down to Main Street. And also just a little reminder that the primary means of getting around for most of the time was walking. I know people had horses, but they were expensive. So the statues that I'm talking about, they were meant to be walked past, not driven by in a flash, which is kind of how we experience things now, right? You see it like out of the corner of your eye. Oh, who's that guy? Who's that dude up there? So, we are going to imaginarily transport ourselves to the east from where we are. And I'm starting our imaginary walk at the East Orange border. The first thing you see at the East Orange border is a giant electronic sign that welcomes you to Orange, courtesy of the mayor, the municipal council, whatever, and advertising things happening in Orange. However, for our purposes, if it was the olden days and you were walking from East Orange into Orange, what the town wanted you to see to welcome you to town was not a big electronic sign, but it was a statue, okay, a Civil War statue. So we are in a park, okay, called the Orange Township Military Commons. Okay, that's what's at the border. And as you guys probably know, towns would have like a green or common where the military would muster or practice. So like every small town has this. And it's funny, especially in Vermont, they're very big on their greens and commons, right? Like New England town, right? The little church and the common, yeah. And I don't know, there's something like primal American about that. Even though we don't need this, I think the American military is doing just fine without us. There's something about the common or the green that is powerful, right? Even, like in around 1900, on the green, people would gather for July 4th. There'd be bands, parades, speeches. It was a place for people to gather. In any case, for our purposes, what is there today? It's a couple of blocks long, and it's concrete sidewalks, stone pathways, trees, grass, flowers. It's really very nice. It also has benches. It's a busy part of Orange, so there's stores, restaurants, nail salons, that sort of thing. American icons, there's Wawa, there's McDonald's icons, right? Another thing that I noticed when I visited recently several times is, the delivery guys on their e-bikes with their big boxes on their backs. That park, I noticed, has become kind of a rest and hangout for those guys, which I think is great. So the delivery warriors of Orange who are delivering your dinner, they're resting on military commons. All right, so let me talk about the statue now. So actually I'm going to kind of describe and kind of act out the statue a little bit. Okay, so now we're in Orange Military Commons, and we see the Civil War memorial. This was installed in 1899. How many years is that after the Civil War ended?
30-something.
34 years. That's a really long time. That wouldn't happen today, right? But I think that after the Civil War, Americans needed time to reflect, recover, heal, and regain prosperity, because it takes money to do these things. Also, it's interesting to me, the 1890s were a very active time for veterans organizations, because, think about it, the Civil War guys, they're still alive, but there's also generations that are coming up that don't know, right? So it's like now or never. If we're gonna do this, we gotta do this now, because we're gonna be dead and the kids don't know anything, right? So, and the 1890s, the veterans organization was called the Grand Army of the Republic, which, if you know Cape Cod, there's Grand Army of the Republic Highway, right? The GAR. And the GAR raised the money. So that, I'm just trying to stress that the Civil War statute, that was put up with money raised by people who were there, right? They were there, they lived it. So the statue was dedicated Memorial Day, 1899, and if you're walking and you see the statue, it's on a granite pillar, and it's a guy. He looks kind of like a 1970s rock star from a band or something. You know, he's got the Civil War, the long coat, the long pants, the hat. You know, if you look at it quickly, it's like, oh yeah, okay, that's like the Civil War kind of thing. I think a nice touch in the statue is there's a tin cup slung over his shoulder, which is a little reminder, those guys got really thirsty. You know, tramping through the swamps of Georgia, right, with their little tin cup. And the soldier is carrying an American flag in one hand and a sword in the other hand. So, but the really powerful thing about this statue for me is what it says, because there's very few words. I'll just read it. This is all it says. Soldiers and Sailors Monument in honor of our soldiers and sailors, 1861 to 1865. There's nothing bombastic. There's nothing about our side, their side, Civil War, good guys, bad guys, north, south. There's no highfalutin language about this breach that ripped the fabric of our country. You know, it's just in honor of our soldiers and sailors, 1861 to 1865. So I think that's intentionally very healing. You're trying not to separate the country anymore. And it's just very simple. It's like, if you know, you know. So it's very powerful. Now, I want to talk more about the guy, the soldier. The guy is a color sergeant. I'm not real expert on anything military, but basically to be a color sergeant, you're kind of protecting the flag, you're going into battle. So long story short, you have to be very brave, and there was a high mortality rate. So again, people back then might know that this isn't just an ordinary guy, this is a very brave guy. You had to be good, right? Because, I mean, you're walking into battle waving a big flag. Hello, you know, here I am. There was a very high mortality rate. So now I want to talk about really what the statue's about for me. So I was telling you before that in his left hand he has a flag, in his right hand he has a sword, right? And it's very interesting because in his left hand he's not so much holding the flag as cradling it, very gently holding it. And I take that as symbolic of the love that he feels for his flag, for his country, for whatever America means. It's love, right? It's gentle. On the right side, his right hand, he has a sword in his hand. And the sword is, it has like elongated verticality. He's holding the sword up high, so it's like a Hollywood movie. We're going in. That's one part of it. Also, it's the 19th century, right? So people were more, I don't know, religious, symbolic, whatever. I mean, he's pointing up to heaven, right? And that's where the good guys are, the people who died, the martyrs, etc. Right? So he's pointing us to heaven. And of course, it's his right hand. This is the hand of right.
Yeah.
Right? Absolutely. Another thing is if you stare long enough at this sword. Oh yeah, and the sword, it has a very sharp looking blade. Like if you look at it, it's got quite an edge. If you stare at the sword long enough, you might hear some words in your head of a very famous song, the most famous song of the Civil War. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Hallelujah, glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. So the statue, which is just a guy, this is a statue of righteous anger, right? This is a cause. This is representing a sacred cause, a higher purpose that people gave their lives to. So not a lot of words, but if you know some of the symbols and the meaning, it's quite powerful. And again, this will become clear a little bit later, but I mean, it was done by the people who were there. So there's just some kind of authenticity about it. Anyway, so hallelujah to that. Now I'm going to continue in my walk. So I'm continuing in my walk down the concrete sidewalk of Military Commons, and it's rather boring. There's not anything terribly interesting. You pass by several small, generic, almost factory-made monuments, paying tribute to those who fought World War I, World War II, Korean War, and then you come to something extremely bizarre, just incomprehensibly bizarre. So what do you see? There's a boulder, a giant boulder, which must weigh many tons, and on the giant boulder is a plaque, the plaque, and the plaque has some words on it. So this is Military Commons, there's all these remembrances of wars and all that. And what does the plaque say? The plaque says, peace. October 19th, 1929. This tablet dedicated to the advancement of the peoples of the earth in the arts of civilization and to the abolishment of war on the anniversary of the victory at Yorktown. And then there's a long list of organizations that funded it and are dedicating it. So there's like a rock dedicated to peace, which is pretty strange. That is strange, right? I did a little research on that, and I think I can fill in a few blanks, which is that, remember, I was very surprised when I was in high school, and I learned that World War I was not actually called World War I.
Right.
They
weren't expecting
they
World War II.
didn't know there was going to be World War II. It was called the Great War, the war to end all wars. There were all these ways of describing it because people could not believe that it could happen again. That the senseless deaths, the fields, the gas, the deaths, that it can't happen again. So there was a very strong peace movement in the 1920s. This was like a position people took, that there should never be another war, and the only position is peace. So in the late 1920s, there were various international agreements and treaties to prevent future wars. And I'm not sure about this, but one of these was something called the Kellogg-Briand Pact of Paris, which was an agreement to outlaw war. Okay, we know how that turned out. But I just have a feeling that this rock in 1929 was sort of related to this peace movement in some way. And another thing that I do have to say, that of course the Kellogg-Briand Pact was ridiculed, of course, even before there were any wars, it was ridiculed. But in the long run of history, parts of that treaty did provide language for the Nuremberg trials in 1946 of the Nazi leaders, and for some of the forming of the UN and some writing about crimes against peace and crimes against humanity. So, you know, I feel that it's sort of a legacy of a brief period of idealism, right? And hope, really. And I believe people should not be ridiculed for being idealistic and dreaming of a better world, because, I mean, if we can't do that, what's the point? Why are we here, right? So, but that is a very fascinating thing, the peace rock. All right, so, it's painful, but I do have to just point this out. So this rock was dedicated October 19th, 1929. Yeah.
Wow.
So what happens 10 days later?
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, 10 days later. Black Tuesday was October 29th. And that was the beginning of the Great Depression. And of course, the 1930s lead us on the path to fascism and war and everything that happens. But you know, those people, I have this image of those people standing around the peace rock. You don't know the future. All you can do is hope, right? That's all we can do in the work that we do, right? So, all right, so we'll pass on from the peace rock. I'm going to continue on our imaginary walk down Main Street, and I'm going to walk about 2/3 of a mile west from the Peace Rock to a place that we probably all know well. We're sitting here. This is Main Street and Scotland Road. This is the big church on the corner. The huge church on the corner is currently the First Shiloh Baptist Church. For years, many years that I was coming to the church, it was the First Presbyterian Church of Orange. In fact, it's had many other permutations and identities. But that corner was always a very important corner, and there was always a church of some sort there, going back to, you know, Mr. Puritan, Mr. York Puritan. Anyway, so the statue that I am going to tell you about now is the statue that is at Maine, Scotland. And that statue is called the Dispatch Rider of the American Revolution. And I know some of you know some of this. But before I talk about the actual statue itself, I must tell you about the setting of the statue. The statue is located in the historic graveyard, which is known as the Old Burying Ground. That's the official name. It has tombstones that go back to the early 18th century. I mean, Wayne and I were walking around the other day, and you'll see somebody who was like 68 years old who died in 1735. And it's like, that person was born in the 1600s. That's unbelievable. And you'd be surprised. Yes, some of the tombstones have collapsed, or you can't read them, but quite a lot of them are very clear. And you can see the Abigails and the Johns and the Dorcases and the Phoebes, you know, the old-fashioned names. It's quite amazing to be in that cemetery. In the cemetery also is a plaque listing all the people buried there who fought in the American Revolution. So it's very much a historical, you know, revolutionary colonial era cemetery. Also in 1807, if you recall, at the beginning, I was telling you that 1807 was the beginning of Orange, the city of Orange. So the first municipal meeting of Orange was at the church that was at that spot, a different church. Anyway, the point of what I'm saying is that that corner is very important in the history of Orange. And if you wanted to build the biggest, most unmissable statue, where would you put it? You would put it at that corner, right? Because that's the center of things. So, what about the statue itself? Oh, by the way, a dispatch rider. A dispatch rider is, you know, the guy who brings the message. You know, the battle plan from the headquarters to the front lines.
Over here.
Exactly. The British are coming. The British are coming. One if by land, two if by sea. That guy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very important. So the statue was dedicated June 14, 1907. Now, that's interesting because I was saying before how the Civil War Memorial, that has the feeling of the people who were there. But wait a minute, 1907. Was anybody alive who was in the Revolutionary War? Not remotely. No, there was nobody alive in 1907 who in any way was in the Revolutionary War. Maybe about 120, I think. So that's interesting. Because I don't want to cast any asparagus on that statue, but it's fake. You know, it's fake. It's presenting a nostalgic, romantic image of the misty, glorious American past, where conveniently nobody who was actually there is around. So, what does this nostalgic, romantic vision of America look like? Well, if you know your 18th century man, you know, like a George Washington, you know, they're wearing their breeches and their stockings and their buckle shoes, and they have their little bow, their cooking hair, their bow. Also, you wouldn't know this, but in the 18th century, babies were bound, literally bound, from the time they were out of the womb. So the 18th century posture is very distinctive, right? You can look at paintings of George Washington and you can see it. It's like everybody was a ballet dancer. Anyway, so the dude who's up there in Maine and Scotland, the dispatch rider of the American Revolution, he is definitely not an 18th century man. He is anachronistically dressed. He's wearing this like billowing, flowing cape. He looks like the poet Byron or Edgar Allan Poe or somebody. I don't know. He also has this thick head of helmet hair that looks like somebody used a can of hairspray to keep it in place. He's carrying a pistol and a sword, not used, and of course he is holding a packet of letters because he's dispatch rider. And he's handsome in a David Ken doll in a cape kind of way. Also, it's very interesting. What?
I was thinking Molly brought her students to town and they were looking at it.
Of course.
The prints.
Exactly, the prince. Exactly. Yes, yes. It's worth noting that the statue was created by one of the most famous and highly regarded American sculptors of the era, Francis Edwin Elwell. Mr. Elwell had an interesting background. He was born in Concord, Massachusetts, and he was an orphan, but he was raised with help from the families of Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau. He was kind of like the unofficial adopted child of Louisa May Alcott. So the sculptor of, you know, Prince Byron over there on the corner, if you were being raised in Concord, Mass. in the middle of the 19th century, I don't know, it's like you're living in London when the Beatles are there, or you're living in Paris when Picasso was painting. I mean, this was the top, right? So, but I'll talk about him a little bit later. So, now, it's interesting to me, Americans have gotten very wordy and bombastic. Because the words on this guy's statue, the granite pillar, there's a lot more here. So let's see what it says on the pillar. What are they trying to tell us about this guy? Well, this statue was dedicated Friday, June 14th. June 14th is Black Day.
Yeah.
1907, centennial of first town meeting boarding. So this is celebrating the 100th year of the town. Also, the 130th anniversary of the adoption of the Stars and Stripes, the flag, as our national emblem in memory of the men and women of this community who assisted in establishing American independence. That's quite the mouthful. It's kind of getting a lot of messages in it. The flag, it's also telling you there are a lot of people here who have roots, you know, in this community, who've been here for many generations. And you can use your imagination, the public unveiling, there was a parade. The newspaper that I looked at said there were 25,000 people lining the streets of Orange. And I read all about the parade. It was policemen, it was all sorts of factory workers. It was like a big deal. The governor spoke, and you can imagine people waving flags, bands playing, Star Spangled Banner. It said, at 1 p.m., as the statue was unveiled, church bells rang and the factory whistle blew. And there's actually a little quote from the governor, which I thought was kind of interesting. Talking about Orange, he says, the farms have turned into house lots, factories have sprung up, wealth has come in among you. So this is like a celebration of prosperity, wealth. So what can we say about this statue? So it's interesting, right? This is the dispatch rider of the American Revolution, but it's not really about soldiers or memorial to people who died. Dispatch rider, it seems very American to me in terms of an America that's growing fast, moving fast, and is becoming a world leader in communication. Communication is vital to capitalism and business, so this sculpture is not a memorial to war, it's a memorial, a monument to capitalism. And I think if you look below the surface, there's even more to it. So the city of Orange, as I was telling you before, had deep roots in American history, going back to the Puritans who came here in 1666. And there were a lot of families here who were very proud of their roots, going back to the Revolutionary War. There were many active chapters of an organization called the DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution. Those of us of a certain age, we do not have a positive impression of the DAR. They were notorious for many things, including not allowing Marian Anderson to sing at their public hall because she was black, and other things. But I don't want to be too hard on the DAR of 1907. I mean, because in the 1890s, there were all these organizations, all these fraternal, sisterly organizations. So the DAR was just one of many. Like, that's what people did, is they kind of formed societies and organizations. In any case, they were very active in Orange. They were very much behind the statue in terms of the funding and everything. So America and Orange was growing by the end of the 19th century. It was changing demographically, and met all these workers that we're talking about. Many of them had names reflecting origins in Italy, Germany, and elsewhere. So, I mean, I'm fond of our dispatch rider with his cape and his helmet here. It's okay, you know. But when I look at it now, I kind of see the forces of old Orange against trying to assert itself, trying to hold on against new or changing Orange. And it's not necessarily visible in the statue, except for the oddness of the statue. But there is something really unusual about this statue that I noticed. So I was telling you about the sculptor, Mr. Elwell. If you look closely at the statue, his name is inscribed at the bottom. You don't really see that on the statue necessarily. But not only is his name inscribed on the bottom, it says, F.E. Elwell, born in 1858, Concord, Mass. So to me, it's subtle, but that's like really in your face, right? This is our vision of America, this is our America, and we got a super American to do the sculpture. And I'm really out on a limb here, I'm gonna get even more sinister. But it's just interesting to me because I have studied this period quite a bit, and trust me, there were lots of Italian, and Italian-American sculptors who did great sculpture that was, appreciated and commissioned. And of course, Orange had a very large Italian population. But they get Mr. Elwell, Mr. Concord, to do the sculpture. So I just feel that, okay, let me keep going. I'm wrapping it up now, but just the sculpture to me, it's like Disneyland, right? It's like we've got Americana Disneyland down on the corner, right? And it's rather charming, and the cemetery is fascinating, and the sculpture is quite interesting. But it's not really honoring the dead. It's really trying to freeze an image of America based on what was nostalgia in 1907. I don't know what we call nostalgia this from 1907.
Nostalgia squared.
Nostalgia squared, yeah, exactly. So that is the end of my talk. Just a few last things is, I said at the beginning that we don't know the stories or we forgot the stories. So it's just interesting to learn some of those things about the passion, the motivation. And perhaps my words to you today will inspire some passion or motivation in some way to revisit or re-energize the spaces, to do something to incorporate them into our vision of the future. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rain. Okay, so at the end. That was great, Darcy.
Yeah, it really was. Very animated.
You know that church was in over that cemetery.
I'm sure all sorts of terrible things were
Recently,
Yeah.
that's 5 years.
Wow, what stopped them? Who owns the cemetery?
The church.
Oh,
And
okay.
the HBC, or that, or the,
Yeah, it is some kind of,
I don't, yeah.
Historic
Yeah,
something.
so they had ground finders down there,
yeah.
taking the breaks, and they were on their way to do it.
Well, I'm glad they didn't.
Wow.
And I don't know what the future is, but any kind of green space or open space is priceless. So, just on that level, it would be terrible to lose that.
Originally, the way that church in Hook River is elevated from
Yeah.
the street level there, I'm thinking maybe originally it was at street level before they put the roads in, or,
Oh, probably, yeah, because it's like raised,
yeah, quite high, right?
yeah.
It also makes me wonder given that it's such prime statue real estate, if there was another statue there prior to 19.
That's an interesting question. That's worth looking into. Was there another statue there? Or something?
What's the
There
age
a
of the
church
building?
there because that church was in the middle of Main Street until there was a fire, and then they went there. I didn't think there was a church at that spot.
There've been a lot of different permutations at that spot over centuries.
Fascinating.
Isn't there a
Around
graveyard?
the corner, right, is the other graveyard.
Right.
Yes,
That's the graveyard for the church.
yes,
the
which is
Methodist.
also
Right.
lovely. That is
Yeah.
very nice also. Actually, not related to the statues, but I got a sort of insight about something that I've wondered about for 30 years, which is, why is this the first Unitarian church of Essex County? Like, I've always wondered, why is that? And I just sort of had this vision, like, well, I mean, this is the place to be, kind of in the shadow of that church. And if that's the first Presbyterian church, you want to be the first Unitarian church. So that kind of came to me like a light bulb, because, why do, and also being the first is very optimistic.
And not just of Orange, but of all of Essex County.
Yeah, well, you know what, that also speaks to the wealth of this community,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
Because if you're founding a Unitarian church, that just implies a certain affluence.
Hmm.
So that's another little insight that I had in the course of doing this. So, any questions, Wayne?
It was very good.
That was
Thank you.
great, Darcy.
I really enjoyed your analysis.
I liked your acting out of the statues.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was great.
Yeah, well, I
It was
thought-
like you were looking into their minds and their and really seeing what their behavior during the time that they existed. I thought that was really
Thank you.
brilliant.
Yeah, I've taken lots of pictures, of course, but I thought, well, if I show pictures, then it becomes like a high school lecture or something.
Mm-hmm.
Picture of, and
It
that,
was so much more vivid to be like told.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, we've all probably walked that stretch of Main Street so many times.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Wayne says.
Well, thank you on Julia Ward Howe. That's good. You saved that. You didn't say that when we walked down there. That makes sense. The sword lifted.
Mm.
I also think it's sort of, I had a different reaction when we saw it the other day, that it's the kind of, it's not very belligerent in its message. As you said, it's such a simple message. Like right after the Civil War, I think you would have to say something, I hope, about the Union and the Army of the Republic and all that, but nothing there about that.
Yeah,
Of course, that's the period when all the big Confederate statues are going up in the South.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
yes,
So, I don't know to what extent this was in conversation with that.
It does make me think about the ways in which our failure to address all of those problems sort of directly leads us to our problems today.
yeah,
And it's sort of like
yes.
very neutral,
It does.
non-statement.
I once read an article, which if I can find, I'll tell you about the, all the stuff at Gettysburg. So there were, units were raised, in particular, Civil War units came from towns,
Mhm.
towns would say. And then after the war, the towns would do a memorial at Gettysburg. And that went on for decades. So that's still going on in this period.
Mhm.
That you're talking about, where the Civil War statues.
The 1890s,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that's interesting too.
Mm.
But it's very interesting, where do you put the statue? Like, when do you put it at Gettysburg, when do you put it in your town? That's a very interesting thing when the Vietnam Veterans Memorial goes up in Washington, because the whole one of the things at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial is that people leave stuff there.
Mhm.
And it's sort of like, where do you find the dead in a way? Where do you-
Exactly,
where do you
yes.
communicate with them? Like, is it
Yeah.
in Military Park, or is it Gettysburg, or where is it? And I think that passes after a while, because it's not the direct, it's just.
Exactly. That's kind of the point I was trying to make, is that as the years go by, you just lose the
But I don't
connection.
think that had passed in 1890 for the Civil War, which is your point. But the 1907, that's some other kind of.
Mm.
And also, my complaint about that statue is he's some huge guy, right? He's a football lineman.
Exactly,
He's not a dispatch writer.
no.
He weighed
Probably
too much
not.
to go fast.
Crawl through brambles.
Yeah. great. Should we adjourn to the
Oh,
parish hall and have a
yes.
meeting?
I just wanted to
Perhaps-
say one more thing on the
Yes.
statue thing, which
Yeah.
is that the Peace Rock was so inspiring to hear about, and it made me think about that boulder is it in Colgate Park?
Yes,
was
it is.
supposed to be, was a boulder that citizens who representative government placed there with the intent of putting a plaque.
Ben Jones placed it there. When Colgate Park was renovated, he placed that boulder there with the intent of putting a plaque to honor citizens for representative government.
Is there a plaque there?
There's not, but maybe we should place
Maybe,
it.
maybe,
And that takes me to the last point I was going to
Yeah.
make, which is that as we're thinking through the work we're doing on these buildings, they have already floated the idea of having some sort of UU sculpture out front, but the idea of using sculpture as a way to lift up the legacies that we're trying to continue here
mhm.
is something that I think we should take very seriously.
But once
So
you put it up, it's there for a long time.
In 135 years,
Yeah.
maybe there'll also be called Darcy Hall will come and unpack all the slightly weird decisions we made about what goes on there.
They will. What were they thinking?
What were you thinking? Yes. Yeah. All right, shall we?
Or is Wayne coming to the meeting?
And Myrna?
I don't know if Wayne's coming. Wayne, are you coming?
Yeah, I just have to step out, but I'll be back within 10 minutes. Yes. Oh. If it can be done virtually, if we can do Zoom in the other room too. Yeah, sure.
No, no,
And
Wayne,
Myrna
we're
will send you
expecting
the
you
other
to
link
get
too,
on the plane.
It's gonna materialize over
Yeah.
there.
Beam me up.
Thank you.
Can you hear us, Myrna?
Thank you.
So informative.
Do you want to give a thumbs up if you can